We're going to have a panel of individuals representing different areas of eastern Nebraska here. We have Ben and Paula Sue Steffen, who farm down near Humboldt, and if they'd come forward, I've got a few chairs here. Tom Fick is a certified crop advisor from Albion, Nebraska, and Mick Minchell is a farm operator from the Waverly area. So if those individuals would come up and find a seat, we'll start thinking of questions now for them, okay? Don't fight over the chairs, guys.
Yeah, so I thought maybe you'd like to. Here's why you guys can share on Valentine's Day.
You can pass this back and forth, okay? So,
All right, well, let you guys have it. You can start with one. We got one to pass around here. So,
okay, where you want to start? And get out of the light here. Okay, very good. So we've got 4 individuals that have had experience with cover crops in their farming operations or in their business. And first of all, Mick Minchell here on my left, Farms by Waverly. Mick, tell us a little bit about your farming operation and share with us your experiences with cover crops, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Oh, let's see. I got about 1,300 acres of corn, soybean. About 60% of it are Sharpsburg Hills. The other 40% are bottoms. And if anybody knows me, part of it's good and part of it's not. The bottoms are pretty good, but you have large areas of poorly drained, high water tables. And the hills are, like I said, Sharpsburg, terraced, and that's cover crops for the last few years, just mostly cereal rye.
Excuse me. Okay, I turned my mic on. Did you use? You're fine. You said you seeded some cereal rye in the fall of the year. Did you plant the following spring corn, beans, both? Did you work with the NRCS on cost share? Did you plant a mixture of cover crops? Tell us a little bit about that.
I looked at the NRCS cost share. If there's a hard way to doing something, I do it. So I was playing with the cereal rye, and one of the first things I should have looked at was planting a little earlier, the cereal rye, and by doing that, I needed to spread out the varieties maturities so I could get the fields faster. The cereal rye, first year out, planted it in one of the wet bottoms. The field, beautiful stand of rye. One of those nice winters, sprouted great, covered everything. And then the rains came, and they started in March, and they finally quit. And I got the soybeans planted on that field about the 27th of May. And that rye, we just barely got it sprayed out 7 days ahead of it. And it was in the boot stage, and it made 71 bushel. A good 20 acres out of that 109 acre field were poorly drained, water tables extremely high, and I got nervous. I called Paul Yassa. He's the one that talked me into this. I drove down, this is right below my house. I'm looking at this, and I drove down there with the tractor. I'd filled it. I opened it up. And what do? That ground is black, absolutely black. And I'm not talking good soil. It should have been white. And he said, drive forward. Okay. He says, what do tracks look like? Well, I could see cleat marks out of the tractor. And he said, Is the planter open? Yeah. He says, drive forward. Drop it in the ground, drive forward. So I did. Sticking to the tires? He said, nope. He said, it's going to hold you out. There was that much organic matter that you could go into conditions a little less than ideal. I'm not saying do it as a matter of course. I'm just saying when time gets to be a constraint, go ahead and do it. If we want to talk about the hills, we have had in the last 3 years, just this last year alone, I had 3 over 3-inch rain events, 2 of them in the spring, where we had cover crop. I didn't get rivulets. I didn't get erosion. It held everything in place. Now, down in my bottoms where I didn't do one field of cover crop on on corn stalks that had gone 190 bushel. I had so much water flowing across this bottom that I had to use a grader to fill in the ditches. The field across the fence that I had got some on was not a problem. Same soil type, same fall and everything as far as drainage. And no, it makes a real eye opener. Plus the tilth on that soil. I've noticed we pull organic matter samples every year when we just pull those as a matter of course to get your nitrogen. And I've been no-tilling since about 87, 88 on every acre. And we hit a plateau somewhere around 3.1 to 3.3. Now, when you take the samples after in the spring for nitrogen, we're coming up with 3.7s to 4.0s, which is very nice to see.
Okay. Very good. Think of things you forgot to say. We'll come back to you, Nick. Okay. Now we'll go to Tom here. Tom, you're from a little different part of eastern Nebraska or east central Nebraska or whatever central Nebraska, Albion area, and tell us about your business and your experiences with cover crops.
Okay, to give you a little background of me, I was in the seed business for a number of years, did a lot of research, that sort of thing. About 1991, my wife and daughter and I decided we'd form a business called KWT Crop Consulting. And a lot of it's in the Sand Hills, but on the edge. Our clients now are based around 22,000 acres. We've had a lot of kids work with us over the years. Some of it's corn on corn guys, you know, and we got some cattle guys to deal with, and that makes it kind of fun as well. But we've been doing this now for a number of years, and the last 10 years probably been the most exciting. I wish I was about 30 years younger, all the changes that we're seeing. And one of the major things that we've done with most of our clients is starting to use some of the cover crops. And then Tamara Jackson Zeems, as I just call her Tamara, she came to one of our fields one day and we're looking at it, and we had some nematode problems. And I'm talking guys that have been using cereal rye, radishes, turnips for a number of years. So we kind of got used to knowing how cover crops should be handled and when to terminate them, sometimes too late, and sometimes we thought it was too late. But anyway, we started looking at some diversity. We got the guys from Green Cover out, Keith Burns, and started working with him. Dan Gillespie, we were working with him on the water issue as well. So anyway, one of my larger clients, we took this aspect and we're out there and we knew we had a nematode issue. We did 10 quarters, looked at it all, and sure enough, we did. So we decided that instead of just worrying about what we can do with these cover crops from the erosion, the nutrient standpoint, we decided we're going to take 5 quarters and take those 5 quarters and put them into a real diversified program, of which 4 of them we're going to leave in for 2 years. That's a pretty big investment. So, of course, the cattle guy figured out he's going to put some cow-calf operations in there as well, so we did that. One particular field we put in for 1 year, and I guess that's one I want to talk about a little bit. we did something major. We used some sun hemp to kind of get the nematodes down, and the whole package cocktail, what do you say, was anywhere from 14 to 17 different type of species. Mainly still thinking, cereal rye's the big goer, triticale, some of the others. The one field I want to talk about is that one that you guys were talking about. When do you plant into green rye? We planted into the rye that we planted, and this is interesting, planted in the fall. We backed it all up, came into that field, and it had been one of our poorer fields. And everybody's talking about inputs these days. We were looking at some of our poorest fields, what they were returning to us, okay? And this was one of them. So this spring, we get it in there, one of our later planted fields. It didn't get into about the first week of May. Rye, put it this way, it's a 36-row planter. And driving through the back, you could not see the back of the planter. That's how tall the rye was. Okay, we came in there within 2 days, sprayed it with 48 ounces of Power Max, along with 10 ounces of Verdict and some nitrogen. Really did a nice job of terminating it. Well, the good news was that turned out to be a real nice field. When it's all said and done, it averaged 225 bushels to the acre. And again, this is stuff that it barely made 175 in a real good year. We were real pleased. Now, the positive side that I saw of it was that when we got into that field, we had mulch down in there, excellent weed control. In fact, the grower's now thinking, why do we have to put a pre-merge? Did it really work or not? Okay, that's how good the weed control was. The other thing was that I really felt was a factor for people to realize. We took the old thermometer, put that out there in that 95-degree day. That soil temperature was 10 degrees cooler than a field adjacently that we had done more of a conventional basis. When Ray was talking about the photosynthesis and respiration, what's the main thing that makes us get yield? We're keeping as much of that material into the actual carbohydrate form. So the more respiration, the hotter that the plant gets, which is caused by that hotter soil in growing season. What happens there is we lose that, it goes off. So for us to get that 225 yield, we had that cooler soil during the hot time. And then as we continued into the fall, we still feel that that rye was feeding back and giving us some additional nitrogen. So that's what we're doing. And now we've got 4 more fields that we'll put in, again, a mixed bag of stuff. We use some Rise Up Smart Grass to get some trials to see how that would work for us. And that's kind of one of those fun things as well. And that's what I'm saying. There's so much excitement and then the cover crops as to what you can do. And we're just barely touching what we're gaining. But I can see with the no-till and what we've done, you know, you're going to start with the rye. Try 40 acres, 80 acres somewhere. If it doesn't work for you, fine. There is a way that it can work. And I think that everybody, and I call them the group of scientists that you heard from today, the experts, they really have given some great advice today as to how to use the cover crops and what the future is. So,
Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll move over to Ben and Paula Sue Steffen from the Humboldt area. A little different world than Tom's and Mick's. Tell us about your experience and history of cover crops, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I appreciate being here. Mr. and Mrs. Ward are celebrating Valentine's Day with us today, so we're going to hold hands while we're doing this today, I guess. Yeah. Part of my role in our business, start out with, we operate a dairy farm, a small dairy, about 150 cows in the southeast corner of Nebraska. And we plant cover crops on virtually all of our row crop acres. We do haul manure on some of those acres, but we can't get to all of them with manure. We do not graze our cover crops. The grazing is not part of our livestock operation. And so I realized today the focus was kind of on soybean and corn rotation. And so we have a considerable amount of our acreage that, again, we don't graze and we don't apply manure to. Part of my role in the business and in our partnership really is kind of looking out at the horizon and thinking about the big picture. And fortunately, Paula Sue does more of the nuts and bolts thinking about it, and it kind of takes both. I will say, I don't think that cover crop in an operation, I think it presents a big challenge to management. And if you relish the challenge and the puzzle of trying to do that, take a challenge and move it forward, I think it's a great puzzle to work on. There are some things about it that I think are kind of low stress because we're all engaged in precision farming and a lot of controls on inputs and so forth. But I think there's a part of cover crops that are really low stress. Frankly, I take all of the information from the scientists and I accept all that. So I don't have to convince myself that this is going to be a positive for my soil, or how is it going to do this? For me, the way I process information, I'm convinced it's going to help. And Paula Sue can talk about soil organic matter and some of those things. But for me, that's all. I'm on to the next question. How do I do this and scale it up in a way that I can get over enough acres to make a difference? Because putting it on 10 acres or 20 or, what a small field won't get me enough impact. So on a larger so I'm a big fan of aerial seeding. Get right to something I like. If I could farm with an airplane all day long, I'd do it. That's the way to go. It's fun to watch. And let me tell you, when they're seeding rye with an airplane at 150 miles an hour in your standing corn, the 1st of September in our area, that's the way we apply a lot of it that way. It's done and it's ready to go. If you've never raised wheat, and I've raised a little wheat for a long time, just enough to know what a nuisance it is. And the big nuisance is the volunteer. Now you can throw wheat out of a combine, you can throw rye out of an airplane, you get a shower, it'll grow. It'll grow. Doesn't take much. And by the time we picked our corn this fall, we had rye that was 6-8 inches tall. It was catching the ends of the corn picker snouts. And that stuff, that growth in there collects, it drags those leaves that are coming off the corn stalks in. It all gets digested. And I'm a big fan of aerial seeding. We drill where we don't get, in our soybean stubble, we're running a drill behind the combine right away. Keep somebody busy drilling. And, there's an opportunity for, if you can't do it, you don't have somebody that can do it, there's somebody around the area that can. So it can be a low stress option. You just got to make up your mind that you want to scale it to a point where it will make an impact in your operation. There's a lot of nuts and bolts to it, and the termination's a big challenge. And boy, you can make a plan. You better be ready to change your plan, and you better be ready to change it about every day, reevaluate, and have some fallback options. I'll probably let it go with that for now and pass it over here.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Paul. You're not
add?
going to get out of this. Tell us about the nuts and bolts. Why don't we aerial apply rye in the soybeans?
We've applied aerially applied rye to soybeans once or twice. The problem we had was there was so much growth. We really didn't want to see that extra growth go back through the combine another time. That was pretty tall. We also had some winter peas planted at that time and had a really nice growth on them. Felt like we clipped them off and lost a lot of what we had gained. I would agree with everybody here that have talked about the increase in the organic matter. We've done soil testing since we've started doing the cover crops, and I would say I can say that in every field that we have planted cover crops in, the organic matter has increased over the period that we've done it.
What about soil erosion? You seen anything there? You have a few hills, if I recall, driving around your neighborhood.
We have a lot of hills, and when they talk about the poor yields of 175 over here, we are very, very happy with it. That's a great yield for us. Yes, it's definitely has helped with the soil erosion, and even more than the erosion that's caused from the rain. I've noticed the last couple of years where we have planted rye into bean stubble. You don't realize the amount of wind erosion. We'll drive down the road and see a field that somebody combined last fall that didn't plant any cover crop, and you can, on some of those really windy spring days, you just see the whirl of dirt or soil that's up there in the air, and drive by a field that has cover crop in it and feel like it's holds it down.
One of the challenges I've observed with aerial seeding in the corn is timing. So how do you gauge that? What triggers your call to the pilot, or do you have your own plane?
We don't have an ag plane. There's no problem, Keith. I'm telling you now. She's going to tell you something different.
Okay.
I'm a big fan, and I'm here to say plant that stuff late August, 1st September, get it out there and get it going, because you won't have to worry about it from then on. But we've tried scattering radishes and some other things with it, and that's kind of marginal. We don't think we're getting very good stands with the other, brassicas and things like that. Maybe we ought to do some more of it, and it does take a good relationship with an applicator. I've got a pretty good relationship, and it's still tough. And I keep telling him, you've got to fly the end rows crossways on this nice rectangular field. You got to put the end rows on and then do the rest. And yeah. And he doesn't get it, because I've got rye 100 feet past the end of my field on that end, and down here I'm 100 feet short. And he comes back and it's the other way, and it's every time. So there's challenges.
How many pounds per acre?
That's nuts and bolts.
Typically like 60 pounds if we're aerial seeding it. A bush, 50 pounds if we're drilling it. Now,
I was down there this summer with another research study in the same adjacent to our research study was their cornfield, and we were down there in September. Late September, early October. No, actually it was later than that. It was in October, late October, and you had a lot of rye growing in that corn. I was impressed. I took pictures. I should have showed them today. So yeah, there was
6 to 8 inches at least.
Yep, it was neat. It worked. Okay. Tell us about how you plant your rye. I mean, as far as equipment you have, seeding rate. Do you have any issues with carryover herbicide? If you're going to try something new and different or enhance what you're doing, what might that be?
I use a 40. Oops.
That should be.
Is it working?
Yep.
There we go. All right. I use a John Deere air drill, 40 foot. It matches the same width as my corn planter, and it's set on it's a 50-inch spacing. 50-inch spacing on cereal rye is, as according to Keith Burns and the rest of them, it works just fine. You can, the narrower the better, but 15 does the job. I started out planting 45 pounds. I'm up to just almost 60 pounds right now. Carryover with herbicides. One of the things they warned us when I first started was no more pound of atrazine out there at the second spraying, post-spraying. Also look at what chemicals I use. Make sure the carryover is 30 to 45 days residual on the chemicals I use. So by the time we get out of the field and start doing soybean stubble with the drill, it's the field is clean and we just go. On the hills, I tend to plant cereal rye about 1.5 inches deep. On the bottoms, because of issues with water, I set it down between 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And like the slides were showing, just get it on top of the ground, if nothing else. Get it in contact with the soil. Things I'd like to do in the future, I may talk to him about aerial spraying or aerial seeding. Trying to get it on the corn stalks. I fight that every year. The last 2 years, I'm out there the middle of November starting on corn stalks before we can get done with the corn harvest. That's little things. That's the only thing I'm going to really try this coming year. So.
Same question, Tom, and then
Sure.
I got a new one for you.
Alrighty. A lot of the same things that we just discussed as far as drills, end gate seeders. I've got a few guys in different operations. I prefer the drill if I can. We like to start, if you guys got some silage that he's going to cut, obviously, as it's silage guys are moving out of the field and getting everything off, and we're taking and drilling in with rye. We'd go as low as 38 pounds in some places, depending on what kind of ground we're putting it on. Frankly, we go on the sand. If we've got some sand quarters, we probably go a little heavier just because it needs to be covered faster and sooner. If we've got pivots, we might just crank the pivot on, get them going. Or I've got dry land, obviously, Mother Nature, and we make some praise and hope that it works. One of the rules you guys were talking about is saying in life, you should always be very rigid, have really good rules, right? You should be very, very rigid. And number 2 is to be flexible. And number 2 is always a higher priority than number 1. So, and that's kind of what we had to do, because we were planting rye in the middle of November. As dry as we were for a while, we got some snow on it. Golly, looking at it the other day, and it's looking green. I mean, Albion, we're in the Alps. We've got some nice hills and stuff. What the guys were talking about as far as watching how that stuff is, we don't see anything running off of that where you had that cover crop in. Now remember, we're no-tilling most of these places too. And those are two advantages that we have over somebody that's ripping up soybean ground, as an example.
Nitrogen management. Any thoughts, either one of you, all of you, on nitrogen management as far as cereal rye, cover crops in general?
Well, I'm just to make the point, I think you do get that effect of once you knock that rye down and it's big enough, yeah, it's going to take some nitrogen from you, but it's going to give it back. That's what we see, is that where do we get that? Most of the corn hybrids that you got out there today tend to be a longer fill type hybrids. So you need nitrogen later than they used to tell us. I mean, it used to be, come on guys, get it all out there, boom, you're done. No, it doesn't work that way. We feel, and it shows, I do a lot of research for seed companies and chemical companies as well today. But the key thing I see is with these later fill type hybrids, you've got to have that extra nitrogen